Nicki. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here.
Full-time teacher during school year, and then during the summers, you tour in Switzerland and other countries. I would like to first highlight your teaching career, how long you've been doing it, and what grade, and what you like about it, and then we can move on to the next.
Okay. So I have been teaching for probably 5.5 years. This is my 6th year of teaching. And I got into it because I studied French for my bachelor's degree. And I got a job afterwards at a software company using French. I thought this is great. I really like French and thought it was, I was off on the right path. And I hated that job at the software company. And I don't think it was the job itself, it was just a bad fit for me. But I just I had never experienced like sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. Like literally, that's all you do. You just sit in one chair for 8 hours. For some people, it works great. I know a lot of jobs like are that way. But for me, I was like, I can't believe that this is what adulthood is. Like you grow up and then you just sit all day long. So that was like a very introspective time for me where I just thought this cannot be the rest of my life. I can't do this the rest of my life. And so I started looking for something else to do based on a few criteria. One was I didn't want to be in front of a screen all day. And the other one was I wanted more interaction with people. And we can, I don't know that junior high kids was what I had in mind at the time. I don't know if that's the kind of interaction I was thinking, but that's where I ended up. But so I started thinking about teaching at that point. I had thought about teaching when I first started college, but quickly kind of like pushed that aside. And I was actually kind of against the idea of teaching for a long time. But then after that experience, I thought that might be a better fit. I had a hard time thinking of a lot of other careers that kind of would fit those two criteria that would, pay a decent wage. Like my dream would probably be to like mow lawns all day. But like just be outside and be working with my hands. But I kind of settled on teaching. I wasn't quite sure that's what I wanted to do. I liked the idea of having summers off so that I could do something else. And I finally thought, you know what, if I love the outdoors, if I taught during the school year, I could do something out in the outdoors during the summer. And I thought maybe I could be a park ranger or something like that. And so I found a program in France where I could work as a teaching assistant for a year, and I would get, kind of minimal salary for the year. I only had to work 12 hours a week. It was a pretty sweet gig. But I was like, I'm going to go just test it out and see how I like it, just how I like teaching generally. So I went to France for a school year and was an assistant to the English teachers in a high school and a junior high. And I enjoyed it. And so while I was there, I got accepted into a master's program at the University of Utah that was for language teachers, and it got you a teaching license at the same time. So I came back and did that. But at the end of my master's program, I was like, I am not teaching. I just was like, no, I don't think this is for me. And I spent about probably 3 years, maybe a little less than that, doing other things. And until I finally, honestly, a teaching job kind of landed in my lap, and it was part-time. I was kind of in between things. I thought, I'll try this. And I took it part-time. The next year it turned into full-time, and I've been there ever since. And it's a pretty good fit for me. Like, I don't know that I wake up every day feeling like I was born to do this, but I think every job has its pros and cons, and I think overall it's a pretty good fit for me.
I know you mentioned that you didn't want to sit at a desk and you
Yeah.
didn't want to, be on the computer. What about teaching do you really like? Have you taught the same age group?
Junior high this entire time, and here in Utah, junior high is seventh, eighth, and ninth grade. So these kids are like between 12 and 15 years old. When I did originally think about teaching, I thought I would want to teach high school. I still think at some point I will likely at some point in my career change to high school, but the junior high kids are fun. They still have this like kind of young, youthful, like they like their teachers, they like to please their teachers, but they're a little more mature and a little more independent than elementary school students. So they're a fun group, and sometimes they are just fun. They're a lot of fun. One thing that's surprising to me is I actually spend a lot more time at my computer than I thought I would as a teacher, because you're doing a lot of grading. And then, I mean, with COVID, when we went online for a while, that was all, I was at a computer all the time. The thing that is surprising to me about teaching that I really enjoy, that suits my personality really well, is that teaching actually also offers a lot of autonomy. Like, you have your curriculum, you have to teach your curriculum, but you can decide how to do it. And there's not really, at least where I'm teaching, there's not somebody like breathing down my neck telling me exactly how to do things. Your principal comes in and observes you 2 or 3 times a year. And as long as you are teaching the material in a successful way, there's not, you're the expert more than the principals of your school of your subject matter. And they trust you to know how to teach your subject matter. And so you can kind of do it in a way that suits you. And it just feels, I was surprised by how much autonomy I feel in teaching. So it kind of, that was kind of what I liked about working at home and doing my own thing. It feels like that has kind of carried over. There are things that schools are very strict about, like obviously you have to be there right on time. The class can't start without you. You have to stay there all the time. And even for safety reasons, like I have to email the office if I'm leaving campus to run an errand during lunch or go grab some food, because if there was a fire in the middle of the day and they had to do a fire drill and we have to count the students, they need to know if somebody's off campus and where they are. So it's like you're a little bit micromanaged in some of those ways, but in other ways, like you have a lot of liberty to decide like how to run your classroom, and I really like that a lot. So.
Well, and then another huge bonus that you mentioned was that you have the summers off. Tell me about what you do now in the summer.
The schedule with teaching is maybe like the biggest draw for me. Like I like teaching, I like the kids, but if it was 12 months a year, it's a very stressful job, and it would probably be a bit too much. But you get like maybe 10 weeks off in the summer. It's just like unheard of,
Yeah.
In addition to that, you get a fall break, 2 weeks off at Christmas, spring break. You get all the bank holidays, the 3-day weekends, and that part of it is like really awesome. So I had the idea early on that I wanted to work in the outdoors if I became a teacher. It seemed like a nice balance. And when I went to France to be a teaching assistant in the schools there, I found this hike, 2-week long trek that went from Mont Blanc to the Matterhorn. And it starts in France and goes into Switzerland. And I was like, I'm going to do this. And I gathered some other people who were going to be doing the same job as me that year. Didn't know any of them. And we set out on this hike, and it was just the adventure of a lifetime. And I loved it. But on the trail one day, I met, well, in a little hut, basically, I met a man who runs a trekking company guiding tourists, American tourists mostly, over in Switzerland. And we started talking, and it turns out we lived just an hour from each other back in the States. And he was like, you should come work for me. And I was like, okay, sign me up. And it was really just a miracle, I think, like that we ran into each other right at that time. And it was right at the time he had been running the business for a while, all by himself. He had been doing all the guiding, all of the office work, everything. And he was just getting big enough where he needed some extra help. So I came on, and I was the second guide that he had. And so for the first summer or two, it was just he and I running all the tours. And so that was in 2010 that I met him. I started working for him summer of 2012. And so my idea was, oh, I'll become a teacher and then I'll try to find something in the summer. Well, it kind of happened backwards. Like I found this guiding job first, then I spent the year as a teaching assistant, then I started grad school. I'm doing it for 10 years now. Love it. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. Like when you're taking people who are on vacation, and when people are on vacation, they don't want the day to end at 5 o'clock. You know, they want to keep doing stuff. They want to see what there's to see. So we're up early, hiking probably 6 to 10 miles a day, coming into these quaint little European villages, exploring. Then we have dinner, and there's usually a group of 12 or 14 of us. And, you know, European style dinner usually lasts 2 to 3 hours. So we don't usually get back to our hotel rooms until 10 o'clock at night, go to sleep, wake up, and do it all over again the next day. And I'm with groups usually for about 2 weeks, so we get to know each other pretty well.
Have to be certified in anything because hiking and you're such a long trip. Are you certified in any medical things, or do you
So
need
that's
to
a great
be?
question. Guiding has a wide spectrum of certifications, requirements, and all of that. I am a wilderness first responder. That's about a 60-hour course that I do every couple of years, to just be trained on basic medical procedures in a wilderness environment. Um, and then the rules are really different in the US and in Europe, and I don't know exactly what they are in other areas of the world, but in the US, there's no standard. You could start a guiding company. You wouldn't need necessarily any credentials. In the US, though, the biggest holdup is so much of our wilderness is publicly owned. It's national parks, state parks, forests, those kinds of things. And there are very strict rules about commercial activity in those areas. So it's not so much the guiding credentials that are a big hangup, but um, the commercial permits for being allowed to bring groups into a national park if they are paying clients, those kinds of things. So our operation actually doesn't do anything in the United States, mostly because of those reasons. Though there are groups, there are businesses that do that. And a lot of times it's people who have been in place for decades. They know the permit system, they're first in line. And coming in as a new person, I think it might be kind of hard to compete with that. Another option is to work for a company that's already in place if you're interested in working in the outdoor industry in the United States. But in Europe, there is quite a bit of regulation, and there is a more standard training, I guess. And it's pretty serious. It's pretty intense. It takes a lot of time and dedication to become certified. One of the most standard certifications, I would say, is an International Mountain Leader, an IML. And there are other certifications. There are a Wilderness Leader, and in France they have a range of leaders. One is called I'm trying to think of what an English equivalent would be, like a
Say it in French.
accompagnateur en montagne, like a mountain, company, accompanier.
Companion.
Not a word in English, I don't think, but that's kind of the basic level to take people hiking. And then there's like a guide level that's above that. And usually it takes a couple years to get certified. That's not saying it's not like going to school full time for a couple of years, but for during 2 year period of time, you're regularly spending weekends on excursions, regularly doing work, and it's quite expensive as well. In France, you absolutely have to have one of those certifications, and there are police on the trails, kind of like national park rangers that will check your paperwork. In Switzerland, that's not entirely the case. There are different ratings of trails, and on basic hiking trails, you don't have to have certification. Now, these things come up in legislation, and sometimes things change. But once you get to more technical trails, you you absolutely have to be certified to be guiding people. I guide people on routes that you don't have to have a certification um, to guide people on. But I wouldn't suggest it to anybody who doesn't have experience. Like I definitely think you can get that education through experience, but that you should have some experience. And in our company, what we do is we pair a more novice, unexperienced guide with an experienced guide. They do several trips together until that guide has more experience. But more and more, we're just hiring certified guides to guide. Yeah. So the question on do you need certification? Do
Yeah.
you need training? It kind of depends. One nice thing about becoming like a IML or getting some other kind of certification is that you're kind of a part of a union, for lack of a better word, afterwards, and um, they help promote certain wages for guides. They help secure certain jobs. So there's certain advantages to certification in that way.
My last question is, what would be your advice to someone who maybe wants to get into the teaching field or touring, or just someone who's starting to look for careers? What would be your advice to them?
That's a good question. I think that it's important to know yourself, like know just what is going to make you happy, what is going to be help you grow, and look for something that fits that. There's a lot of opportunities out there, especially if you're willing to seek them out and work hard. But if you know, like, and some of that you learn along the way, right? Like I learned along the way, probably not a desk job for me. That's probably not the best fit for
Yeah,
me.
trial and error a little bit, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it takes some time, maybe. And I still feel like in some ways I'm still figuring out like what the best balance is for me. It's probably just a lifetime pursuit. But yeah, think about what you want your life to be. When I was in grad school, there were several people in my program who were there because they wanted more time with their families and they thought teaching, I'll have the same schedule as my kids. I'll have time off in the summer. We can travel together. And so that was something they had taken into consideration. And then guiding, like teaching has like such a nice work-life balance. In some ways, it's a very stressful job. And so during the school year, sometimes it can feel like, oh, I just don't have time, especially at the beginning. You could be working all evening.
I mean,
But
Nicki, you're educating the next generation.
that's right. It's worth it. It's worth it. But
The pressure is on.
that's right. Sometimes you really feel it too. But I go from like one extreme to the other in some ways. Like that's got a pretty nice balance, especially it's taken me honestly like 6 years to get to the point where I feel like, oh, it's 3 o'clock. I can just go home. Like, but there were several years where it was just like, no, I'm just working all the time. But now that I've gotten to that point, it feels pretty nice most of the time. But then I have this other job where it's like it's 24/7 the whole time that you're with them. So just knowing, is that something I'm willing to do? Like, can I be in an environment like with guiding? You're basically on all the time. There's not really a way to like get away and just like take some time to yourself. So yeah, you got to know yourself. You got to figure out what you want out of life and kind of try to find the right balance, I think. So
It's perfect. Thanks, Nicki.